York seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 384, printed in Part A of House Report number 117-405, offered by Mr. Bowman of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1224, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Bowman, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to urge support for my amendment that will take an important step towards restoring congressional war powers. This amendment will bring our unauthorized military presence in Syria to a long overdue debate in Congress so we can ultimately do our constitutional duty to vote to authorize or reject military action. Members on both sides of the aisle have long recognized the Constitution and War Powers Act of 1973 grant Congress the exclusive power to send our servicemen and women into war. Members of Congress are duly elected by their districts to represent them in Washington to vote and decide on legislation and determine how the U.S. uses the power of the purse and sword. Unfortunately, unauthorized military presence undercuts this role. A member of Congress should never learn about an airstrike from the news. This is why the American people must decide when and where we use our military might, and that decision is made through their congressional representatives. Ensuring that Congress continues to authorize military activity is not only about guardrailing good democracy, it is also about fiscal responsibility and integrity. Washington is known for military contractors lobbying for endless wars to ensure endless profits, even when our lowest paid service members have to rely on food pantries to feed themselves and their families. That is a policy choice, and our bloated Pentagon budget compared to our investments in schools, health care, and jobs at home is a policy choice. Our military footprint extends across dozens of countries far from public scrutiny and accountability. My bipartisan amendment, which I'm honored to be joined by Representatives Kana, DeFazio, Schakowsky, Blumenauer, Lofgren, Bush, Jones, and Kemick in offering, is a fundamental next step towards breaking that cycle. This is a question of war and peace that should be debated and answered with a recorded vote in Congress. This amendment does not take a position on substantive Syria policy questions. It merely requires this body to follow the Constitution and hold a debate and vote to authorize military action. I hope that my colleagues will agree that our troops and the American people deserve to see this body hold that debate and then cast their vote. Under the last administration, former President Trump made it clear that U.S. military troops in Syria were there to secure the oil, but an explicit authorization from Congress was never obtained for that purpose. I disagree with claims that the 2001 AUMF, which was about responding to the September 11th attacks, authorized our troops to engage in hostilities against these forces, which nobody argues had anything to do with those attacks, or to guard oil fields. My colleagues who believe that the President does not need specific authorization to deploy U.S. military forces to seize Syria's oil in an unconstitutional war should just admit that to their constituents. They don't care about the duty of Congress, the Constitution, or the War Powers Act. And they certainly don't care that our military budget is even larger than our domestic budget. I agree with President Biden, who has called for a new era of relentless diplomacy and that U.S. military power must be our tool of last resort, not our first, and should not be used as an answer to every problem we see around the world. One step in the right direction would be to restore war powers, which is the solution put forth in this amendment. I honor and respect the incredible sacrifices made by our Kurdish allies. Nothing in this amendment supports abandoning the Kurdish people, nor do I personally support that. Let me be clear, this is simply a vote to restore the power of Congress in authorizing military presence in Syria. The current unauthorized U.S. military presence of indefinite duration means that the U.S. may pull troops with little warning and with little regard to what will happen once the troops are gone without a gradual release. Let's learn from the horrors in Afghanistan. I want to have a transparent and vigorous debate in front of the American people on the role of the U.S. military in Syria. When we have that debate and vote, it may be that this body authorizes support for such a military action to support the Kurdish people. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania